Ladies and gentlemen, you will never rise above the level of belief you hold about yourself. That's the law, not a law of man, a law of life. You can study the techniques. You can chase the strategies. You can listen to every motivational speech ever recorded. But if the voice in your head says, "I'm not enough," then nothing you do will ever be enough either. You can't outperform the limitations you silently accept. Belief is not a feeling. It is not a fleeting emotion that comes and goes depending on how the day treats you. It's a deep-rooted conviction, planted in the soul, watered with action, strengthened through struggle. It's the quiet, unwavering fire that says, "I can, I will, I must," even when the evidence outside says otherwise, even when the noise of the world grows loud, especially when the doubts inside your own mind start to echo louder than anything else. Belief isn't born when it's easy. Belief is born when you have every reason to quit. And you don't. The world will test you over and over again. It will throw failure at your feet, mock your ambition, make you question your worth. It will ask if you're serious or if you're just pretending. Most people flinch. Most people fold. Not because they don't have potential, but because they never learn to believe in who they are when no one else does. That's the first step. Before you build the business, before you chase the goal, before you try to lead others, you have to lead yourself. You have to look in the mirror and tell the truth, not the comfortable truth. The full truth. Who are you? Who do you want to become? And are your daily actions aligned with that vision? Self-belief is not arrogance. It is not ego. It is responsibility. When you believe in you, you act accordingly. You stop settling. You stop shrinking to fit in rooms you've outgrown. You stop apologizing for wanting more. You stop being surprised when you win, because you've already seen it in your mind 100 times. That's the power of belief. It lets you live in the future before it happens. It gives you the fuel to move like it's already done, to prepare like it's already yours, to show up like success is not a fantasy but a guarantee earned through effort. But belief is not given, it is forged. It is built through scars, sweat, solitude, and silence. It is built when you show up for yourself over and over again, when nobody's clapping, when nothing's working, when you feel like giving up. You keep showing up anyway. That's when the real belief is formed. You don't believe because it's easy. You believe because it's necessary. And if you don't, someone else will hand you their belief system. And you'll live in a mental cage they built. You'll work a job you hate, act like someone you're not, and chase goals that don't even belong to you. All because you never had the courage to trust your own inner voice. That voice, the one whispering that there's something more for you. It's not a lie. It's not wishful thinking. It's your soul remembering who you were before the world told you otherwise. But belief demands evidence. And the only way to create that evidence is through action. You don't think your way into belief. You act your way into it. You do the hard things. You show up on the days you feel broken. You learn, you fail, you adjust. You keep the promises you make to yourself. That's how you build trust with your own mind. That's how you become someone you believe in. And when you believe in you, your whole life changes. Not because the world becomes easier, but because you become stronger. You stop needing validation. You stop looking for permission. You move different. You speak different. You live with intention. You no longer beg for opportunities. You create them. You no longer fear rejection. You expect resistance and push through anyway. Because belief doesn't remove the obstacles. It gives you the resolve to face them. Most people are trapped in mental loops of self-doubt, not because they're weak, but because they were never taught how to build belief. They were taught how to survive, not how to build a legacy. They were taught how to follow, not how to lead themselves. But that cycle can be broken. It begins the moment you stop seeking something outside to prove your worth and start doing the inner work to remember it. You were not born average, you were born equipped, but that potential only activates when you start believing that the calling on your life is real, and then backing that belief with relentless action. You want to be great? Then stop speaking like you're small. Stop thinking like a victim. Stop moving like you're fragile. You are not fragile. You have survived things most people don't know about. You've endured storms that tried to bury you. And you're still standing, still breathing, still here. That means purpose still lives in you. But purpose without belief is wasted potential. Your dreams are not silly. Your goals are not too big. The life you imagine is not a fantasy. It is possible, but not if you keep talking yourself out of it, not if you keep waiting for someone else to see it before you do. You have to go first. You have to believe first. And when you do, everything begins to align. Not all at once, not without resistance, but with time, with discipline, with faith, the outer world begins to reflect the inner conviction. There is something dangerous about a person who finally believes in themselves. Because you become unstoppable, not because you never fall, but because you always rise. Not because everything works, but because nothing can break your will. That kind of belief is rare, it's earned. And once you have it, no one can take it from you. Most people are waiting to feel confident before they act, waiting for a spark of certainty, waiting to wake up one morning and suddenly believe in themselves because something has shifted externally. But the truth that breaks through all the illusion is this: self-belief is not a feeling. It is a decision. It is a choice you make in the absence of proof. A stance you take not because it's easy, but because you have decided to stop betraying the potential that lives inside you. You don't believe in yourself because the world claps for you. You believe in yourself because you've seen what happens when you don't. There will never be a perfect moment. No lightning bolt will strike to give you permission. No divine feeling of permanent confidence will wash over you. That's not how belief works. Belief is a foundation you lay by force of will, through the repetition of choice. It is born when you look at all the reasons to doubt, all the voices that scream not enough, all the setbacks and failures that have tried to define you, and you still decide to show up, to act, to move forward with conviction. You are not your feelings. Your feelings are real, yes, but they are not reliable architects of a meaningful life. They fluctuate, they deceive, they waver, but decisions made from principle, from vision, from commitment, those shape identity, and the decision to believe in yourself is not made once, it's made daily. Sometimes hourly. Every moment you choose to act from belief rather than doubt, you reinforce a version of yourself that is strong, focused, and grounded. People think they need to feel like a champion to act like one. But it's the reverse. You act like a champion first. You get up early. You train when it's hard. You study when you're tired. You give effort when nobody's watching. And slowly, over time, those actions begin to change your perception of who you are. They create a trail of evidence, and that evidence becomes the foundation of self-belief. That's where the shift happens, not in the mind, but in the movement. If you wait to believe in yourself until you feel ready, you'll still be sitting in the same place 10 years from now. Because readiness is a trap. It keeps people soft. It feeds perfectionism. It convinces you that you must become someone else before you begin. But belief says, I begin now as I am, imperfect, unpolished, afraid. Belief is brave because it moves without certainty. It doesn't ask for a guarantee. It builds one through perseverance. You will never grow into your potential by making decisions from your insecurities. You will never become who you are meant to be while operating under the authority of your self-doubt. At some point, you have to become the kind of person who makes decisions based on your vision, not your history. Your history might be messy. Your past might be painful. But your decision to believe today is what changes the trajectory. That's the power of self-authorship. You become the writer. You stop waiting for someone to hand you the pen. There's a moment every day when you face the voice, the one that says you're not smart enough, not strong enough, not worthy enough. It's there when you wake up. It's there before the big decision. It's there before the risk. That voice won't disappear. But what matters is whether you obey it, whether you let it dictate your actions, or whether you look it in the face and choose to move anyway. That's the gap between who you are and who you could be. That space is where belief is built, and it's not just about achieving something external. It's deeper than that. It's about the kind of relationship you have with yourself. Can you trust yourself? Can you rely on yourself to show up? Can you be the kind of person who doesn't run when it gets hard? Self-belief is about integrity. It's about consistency. It's about becoming the person who backs their own vision without needing applause, without needing proof, without needing to feel unstoppable every second of the day. This kind of belief doesn't shout. It doesn't need to. It's not loud. It's solid. It's grounded. It knows what it stands for. It doesn't flinch in the face of rejection. It doesn't crumble at the first sign of resistance. It expects resistance, and it moves anyway, because it understands that everything worthwhile in life is on the other side of fear. The difference between those who create and those who consume is not talent. It's belief, the belief that their effort matters, the belief that their voice counts, the belief that their existence has weight, and that belief is a muscle. If you never train it, it stays weak. If you only act when you feel like it, you're a slave to your emotions. But when you act in alignment with your purpose, even when it's hard, you become strong, and strength becomes your new baseline, not because life gets easier, but because you get better. That's the hidden reward of self-belief. You begin to live in alignment. You stop pretending, you stop chasing validation, you start becoming someone you respect. You don't need permission to believe in yourself. You don't need perfect qualifications. You don't need a clean past. You need one thing, a decision that says, I will no longer live beneath my calling. I will no longer doubt my value. I will no longer wait to be chosen. I choose me. I choose to believe, and I will prove that belief through action. From that moment on, everything shifts. You no longer need to convince anyone. You no longer seek approval from people who don't understand your vision. You become self-led, self-sourced, self-aware, and that kind of person is unstoppable. Because the world can take your resources. It can ignore your effort. It can delay your results, but it can't touch your decision. The decision to believe in yourself is yours alone. And once you make it, no one can unmake it but you. Belief without action is just noise. It's easy to say you believe in something, but if your actions don't reflect that belief, then it's not real. It's just a comfortable thought, a hopeful phrase, a temporary escape from the responsibility belief demands. Real belief moves, real belief builds, real belief sacrifices. Action is the only evidence that belief exists. Everything else is just talk. You can't claim to be disciplined while consistently choosing comfort. You can't say you believe in your dreams while spending your time avoiding the work they require. Action is the mirror that shows you who you really are. Most people live with a gap between what they say and what they do. They speak about goals, but their routines say otherwise. They talk about purpose, but their habits contradict it. That gap is where dreams die, not because they were impossible, but because belief was never backed by consistent, courageous action. The distance between where you are and where you want to be is measured by what you're willing to do, not what you're willing to feel. Feelings come and go. Action builds the bridge. You don't act because it's convenient. You act because you've made a decision. You act when it's raining. You act when it's hard. You act when no one notices. Because every time you choose to move, even in discomfort, you reinforce the identity of someone who follows through. Every rep, every hour, every uncomfortable choice is a vote for the future you're building. It's how belief becomes structure instead of just sentiment. Your actions are either building your dreams or defending your excuses. There's no neutral ground. If your belief is real, it's costing you something. It's requiring you to stretch, to change, to confront the parts of you that are soft. Because action doesn't lie. It exposes everything. It shows whether you've been honest about your priorities or just emotionally attached to the idea of change. It reveals whether you've really committed or whether you're just flirting with potential. There's something sacred about action. It separates the spectators from the players, the ones who consume from the ones who create. Everyone says they want to win, But the ones who actually do are the ones who kept showing up when it didn't feel good, when it didn't make sense, when it didn't guarantee results. They kept going because they weren't chasing feelings. They were proving belief. They were honoring the vision. That's the kind of belief that lasts. That's the kind of belief that builds legacies. Belief doesn't mean you never doubt. It means you act despite the doubt. You move through it. You pick up the pen, the weights, the tools, whatever is required, and you work. You work through the noise. You show up with the fear. You take steps while being uncertain. And every time you do, the belief gets stronger. You build trust with yourself. You become someone you can count on. That's how confidence grows. Not from motivational quotes, but from the discipline of action in the face of resistance. The hardest part is not the grind. It's the honesty, looking at your habits and admitting where they fall short of your goals, looking at your days and seeing where you're hiding. Most people want results without that level of self-confrontation. They want to keep their distractions, their comfort, their emotional escapes, and still achieve something remarkable. It doesn't work that way. Belief demands a cost, and the price is paid in action, daily. Repeatedly, without applause, there will always be resistance. Resistance from the outside, resistance from within, doubts, distractions, delays, but none of it matters if you act anyway. That's the ultimate rebellion. That's how belief survives in a world that constantly tells you to compromise. You don't need permission to move. You don't need perfect clarity. You just need to act. Even a small step carries weight if it's aligned with your highest intention. One committed action is more valuable than 1,000 inspiring thoughts. You can learn all the strategies, watch all the videos, read all the books, but if you don't act, none of it matters. Knowledge without execution is useless. Understanding without implementation is wasted potential. Action is where the transformation lives. It's where the average gets separated from the exceptional. The path to mastery is paved with repeated action. Not just action when you're motivated, but action when you're exhausted, unsure, scared. That's when it counts most. That's when it carves character. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be consistent. You need to move forward when it's awkward, when it's messy, when the voice in your head says not today. Especially then, because those are the days that build real strength. Those are the moments that rewrite the story you've been living. That story changes not because you feel different, but because you acted different. You are not what you think. You are what you do. That's the truth most people run from. They build a fantasy in their minds and call it belief, but they don't live it. They don't build it, they just imagine it. But belief without application is just a dream, and dreams that aren't chased turn into regret. If you don't act, your vision becomes a weight, not a gift. It burdens you, because deep down you know what you could have been if you had just moved. That kind of regret cuts deeper than failure ever could. The people who change their lives are not the ones who wait to feel like it. They are the ones who learn to act when it's hard, who build the muscle of discipline until it becomes instinct, who connect their actions to a purpose greater than their pain. When you live like that, your belief becomes unstoppable, not because it's loud, but because it's real, because you've proven it to yourself over and over again in the fire. So ask yourself, what are you building with your actions? What kind of belief are you demonstrating with your daily choices? Not your goals, not your hopes, your behavior, because that's where the truth lies. In the grind, in the silence, in the discomfort. Belief is not something you talk about. It's something you show over time with effort. And when you do, the world takes notice, not because you asked it to, but because belief backed by action becomes undeniable. You are always becoming something. Whether you know it or not, every decision, every habit, every word you speak is shaping who you are. The question is not whether you're building an identity, but whether it's your own. Most people are living out identities that were handed to them, not chosen. Given by culture, by school systems, by their parents, by their failures. They live a life they didn't design and call it fate. They wear titles they didn't pick and call it identity. They follow paths they didn't carve and call it destiny. But in reality, they never stop to ask themselves who they actually are, who they want to become. And whether their daily actions reflect that. The moment you stop questioning, you start absorbing. The world is loud and aggressive in shaping you into something useful for its agenda. It rewards obedience, not originality. It prefers you safe, predictable, manageable. It will label you for the sake of convenience, not truth. And if you're not intentional, you'll start believing those labels. You'll start defining yourself by limitations that were never yours to begin with. I'm not good at that. I've always been this way. People like me don't succeed. These are not facts. These are borrowed conclusions, and they are dangerous. The identity you live from will determine the life you build. If you see yourself as weak, you'll avoid pressure. If you see yourself as a victim, you'll interpret every challenge as personal persecution. If you see yourself as small, you'll never attempt anything great. And if you see yourself as someone who needs permission, you'll wait your whole life for someone to approve a version of you that doesn't even exist yet. But once you understand that identity is not discovered, it's constructed, you take the power back. You stop asking, "Who am I?" and start declaring, "This is who I'm becoming." But to build identity, you have to stop outsourcing your sense of self to other people. You have to stop letting opinions dictate direction. You have to stop looking for who to be based on what's trending, what's accepted, what feels safe. Because identity built for applause will always fall apart in silence. You must be willing to go to war with the borrowed identities you've been living under. The ones that tell you you're average, the ones that whisper you're broken, the ones that remind you of your worst days and call it your personality. You weren't born with those beliefs, they were learned. Which means they can be unlearned. You weren't born afraid to speak, to lead, to dream, to build. That fear was taught, which means it can be replaced. Identity is not a fossil, it's clay. It can be molded. Reshaped, refined, not instantly, but daily. And it begins with awareness, with the decision to pay attention to the story you're telling yourself about who you are. That story is shaping your decisions, your habits, your future. Every time you say, "I'm not that kind of person," you're reinforcing a version of yourself that may not even be true. It's just familiar. Familiar doesn't mean accurate. Comfortable doesn't mean correct. We grow attached to identities that no longer serve us simply because they feel known. But known is not the goal. Aligned is. Aligned with your calling, aligned with your standards, aligned with your vision. That's the measure of a real identity, one that is chosen, one that is lived, one that is built through intention and refined through adversity. You do not become the person you want to be by accident. You become that person through repetition, through small, deliberate choices stacked daily, through showing up for yourself when it's inconvenient, through confronting habits that contradict your values, and through refusing to speak about yourself like someone who is powerless, because language matters. Identity is reinforced by what you say out loud and what you whisper internally. When you say, "I am disciplined," and then follow through, you're casting a vote. When you say, "I handle pressure," and then step into it, you're carving a new narrative. Each moment becomes a brick in the structure of your identity. This is not about pretending. It's not about lying to yourself. It's about aligning who you say you are with who you're becoming. It's about no longer allowing your past to write the next chapter. Your story doesn't end with your mistakes unless you stop turning the page. You are not your failures. You are not your family history. You are not your lowest moment. You are who you decide to be, reinforced by the actions you're willing to take to become that person. People will try to define you. Not always out of malice, but out of habit. They'll try to keep you in the version of you they're most comfortable with, but you're not responsible for living in their comfort zone. You're responsible for honoring your potential. That means breaking the mold. That means surprising people. That means outgrowing conversations, environments, maybe even relationships. Not because you're better, but because you've chosen to evolve. And real growth will always look like rebellion to those committed to staying the same. Your identity will always be under construction, and that's not a weakness. It's your advantage, because it means you're never stuck. It means you always have the power to pivot. It means your future is not determined by your history, but by your habits. The person you are today does not have to be the person you are 6 months from now. But that transition won't happen by chance. It will happen by choice. So ask yourself, whose identity are you living? Who wrote the script you're following? Are your beliefs inherited or earned? Are your habits automatic or intentional? Are your values real or recycled? These are the hard questions that build clarity, and clarity is the foundation of power. Because when you know who you are and who you're becoming, distractions lose their grip. Opinions lose their weight, and the world starts to reflect the standard you've set internally. That's when you become dangerous, not because of what you've achieved, but because of what you've aligned. You become someone who doesn't flinch in adversity because you're not acting from impulse. You're acting from identity. You're no longer reacting to life. You're directing it. You're no longer begging for acceptance. You've accepted yourself. That's the shift. That's the freedom. That's the kind of identity no one can take from you because you built it with your own hands. One choice at a time. One day at a time. And every time you choose to live in that identity, you make the old version of you irrelevant. When belief becomes unshakable, it transcends motivation. It's no longer a feeling you chase when the sun's out and everything's going well. It becomes a force inside you, a steady pulse that pushes you forward when everything else is pulling you back. Most people live at the mercy of their circumstances. They let failure define their effort, let rejection define their worth, let fear define their limits. But when you carry unshakable belief, those things lose their authority. They still show up, but they don't stop you because you no longer wait for the world to believe in you. You've already made that decision yourself. You don't become unstoppable because you're perfect. You become unstoppable because you've decided that quitting is no longer on the table. You've decided that detours don't mean dead ends. You've learned to stop assigning deep meaning to temporary emotions. You've learned to move without applause, to rise without recognition, to commit without convenience. That's the result of belief that's been tested in the fire. It doesn't need constant validation to survive. It grows stronger in silence, sharper in resistance, clearer in adversity. There's a power that comes when you've been through enough to know you can survive more. When you've failed and kept going. When you've lost and still stood back up. When you've doubted everything but moved forward anyway. That's not the kind of belief that comes from reading books or listening to speeches. That kind of belief is earned through pressure, earned through obedience to the process. Earned through showing up when every part of you wanted to disappear. That belief cannot be bought. It cannot be taught. It has to be lived. And once you live it, you change. You no longer crumble under criticism. You no longer flinch at discomfort. You no longer spend your time convincing others to understand your path. You've already convinced yourself. That's enough, and that's when momentum begins, because energy flows where belief goes. You start attracting opportunities not because of what you say, but because of how you move, with conviction, with certainty, with quiet intensity. People feel that. Life responds to that. The reason most people don't experience this is because they give up too early. They haven't trained their belief to hold steady when results are delayed. They confuse silence with failure. They think slow growth means no growth. But the ones who win are the ones who keep moving when the path gets foggy. When progress feels invisible, when nothing is guaranteed, that's when belief matters most, not when it's easy. But when it's questioned, you build unshakable belief the same way you build strength in the gym through resistance. Through struggle, through repetition, you keep showing up. You keep getting back up. You keep proving to yourself that you are not your fear, not your past, not your pain. You are your choices. And the choice to believe, again and again in the dark without evidence, that choice builds the kind of person that storms cannot move. Eventually, belief becomes your operating system. It's not something you think about. It's how you move through the world. With purpose, with direction, with intensity, you no longer wait for perfect conditions because you understand nothing about progress is perfect. You stop idolizing certainty because you've realized it's the enemy of growth. You stop needing the path to be easy because you've become strong enough to handle hard. And that's when you become unstoppable. Because the obstacles don't disappear, but they no longer shake your foundation. You've trained your mind to expect resistance, not fear it. You've redefined failure as feedback, not identity. You've disconnected from the need to be understood, and instead focused on being aligned. That kind of belief changes the pace of your life. You stop hesitating, you start executing, you stop asking, "What if I fail?" and start asking, "What's required?" Your sense of self no longer comes from people who haven't earned the right to shape your story. It comes from your commitment, from your discipline, from your ability to suffer for what you believe in without becoming bitter. That is the sign of a warrior, not someone who doesn't struggle, but someone who struggles without surrender. That is what makes belief unshakable. You've tested it. You've stood in the fire and didn't melt. You've lost, but you didn't lose your way. You've been overlooked, but you didn't overlook yourself. That is the foundation no storm can destroy. That is what gives you quiet confidence in rooms where others seek attention. That is what gives you presence without performance, because you no longer need to prove anything. You just are. You embody the belief. You breathe it, you bleed it, and people can feel that. They don't always understand it, but they respect it, even if they don't say it out loud. The world will always try to make you question yourself. It will tempt you with shortcuts. It will distract you with noise. It will try to seduce you back into the safety of conformity. But if your belief is real, if it's built on discipline, vision, and character, then you'll keep going. You'll keep rising, not because you're invincible, but because you're committed. And that's what separates the dreamers from the doers. Dreamers wait for the world to align before they move. Doers align their beliefs with their actions and build the world themselves. Doers don't wait for momentum, they create it. They don't wait for motivation, they generate it through movement. That's what makes them unstoppable. Not talent, not luck, not circumstances, but belief. Relentless, tested, unshakable belief. And when you live with that kind of belief, you stop measuring your progress by what others can see. You start measuring it by how deeply rooted you are, by how little it takes to knock you off course, by how many storms you can walk through without folding. That's the scoreboard that matters. That's how you know you're becoming the kind of person who can carry the weight of real purpose. You are not here to be ordinary. You are not here to fit in. You are here to lead, to rise, to build something that lasts. And you cannot do that without belief that holds steady when everything else wavers. So you decide, every day. You decide to believe again. You decide to move again. You decide to act like your vision matters. You decide to speak like your voice carries weight. And you don't just say it. You prove it with how you live, with how you show up, with how you keep going when others stop. Because once belief becomes unshakable, you become unstoppable, not in the eyes of the world, but in your own, and that's what changes everything.